Okay, so just so everybody knows, I am going to record this session. This will then be circulated out to to those that couldn't make it today, and it will be available for a period on the Active Indoor Leisure Association website, so that everybody has a chance to go and see this content. Now, we'll talk about what we're going to go through now, but what I would like to say very quickly is anyone who commits any content to this is doing so free of charge, and please don't mistake anything that anybody says for bespoke business advice. Ultimately, your mileage may vary if you apply anything from today's call, particularly when you've got, Pete giving you information. I'm going to do a session a bit later on, so just bear that in mind. It's there for you guys to take ideas, but it's not necessarily there to guarantee you success. Your implementation of those ideas will change the mileage you get from those ideas. Okay, so what's on the agenda today? We're going to go through a little bit of trampoline park industry news. We're then going to walk a little bit through the ISO and explain what it is and why it's important. For those of you who don't know what the ISO stands for, it's an international standards document that has been written that is intended to apply to all trampoline parks in the majority of states. So it's a very broad document, but it still focuses, like the original PAS, on two sections. That's construction and operation. Pete's then going to run a little session on explaining what the LOtC quality badge is and how that gains you access to schools, and how that can help schools to understand your risk profile is better than those that haven't done the quality badge. We'll have a quick open discussion, and then we're going to have a break. And anyone who's interested, I was asked if I could commit one of my previous sessions, which is why so many trampoline parks fail and what to do about it. So if you're interested, stick around for that, and if not, then we'll can it after the open discussion. Okay. All right. If you're happy, I will lead us away. First of all, industry news. So, as a lot of you know, the insurance market is still underwritten by just two providers at the moment. And so there's a pretty heavy risk of failure there. One of the greatest risks to trampoline park for investors or for anyone in the market is that if we lose one or both of those underwriters, we may find ourselves in a position where trampoline parks become uninsurable. If they become uninsurable, that means that there will be no public liability cover, which, correct me if I'm wrong, means that we would be working both outside standards documents and probably outside of the law. So it means a closure. That's literally what it means. I think it's probably the greatest threat to our parks at this stage. That leads us to our motivation for enforcement. So the Active Indoor Leisure Association recognizes that those that are engaged in health and safety, essentially you guys that are on the call today, are probably not the people that are most likely to add to our potential risk of underwriters moving out the market. It's going to be those that aren't engaged in this process. And as a result, we've taken the steps to engage with the enforcement community. That's the HSE and your local environmental health practitioners or officers, to help them to enforce against parks that are disengaged, to essentially help them to enforce against parks that are at risk of damaging all of us, our income, our investments, and the facilities that our communities love. So that's what we're going to go through today, how we've been involved in that process, what's involved in that process, and what that means for everybody on this call. Which leads me to my next point. So back in 2017, Pete led a group of us in writing the publicly accessible specification for the construction and operation of trampoline parks, affectionately known as the PAS. Now, the PAS was a guidance document that we felt as a committee on when we were working with the IATP at the time, didn't have a huge amount of teeth. In other words, it was only being used after an incident had occurred, but it wasn't being used for proactive enforcement. That, I believe, has now changed with the ISO. So if you were a poor performing park who didn't live up to the PAS, poor performing in terms of risk profile, then the likelihood of you being found out or being encouraged to do anything about it was going to take place in a civil case after the fact, or worse, in a criminal case after the fact, when the document will be used as a reference point for best practice. Now, we think that is about to change, and we'll go through a little bit more detail as we move through this presentation. Can you all see the presentation, by the way? Can someone just let me know if not?
No, everything's good, mate. Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Sean. Great, thanks, Naomi. See the thumbs up, perfect. Okay, so what's the motivation here? Well, I think if you guys aren't living under a rock, and I'm going to assume you all are, we've had some pretty significant issues take place, that have led to criminal convictions or are leading to criminal convictions in the market, where what's different here and what maybe hasn't been fully understood is that if you let down a member of the public, you don't exercise your duty of care, you could be found guilty of negligence, so to speak. That's a civil issue, and so you might end up having to pay a settlement, some sort of fine. This isn't my area of expertise, so forgive me for if I bastardize this. But the problem here is these are areas where operators have failed in their duties under acts, under the law. So this might be the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act, and they failed in their duties there. And so the HSE has worked, I'm guessing, with the CPS for a criminal prosecution. That's different to a civil case. Speak to your insurers to understand that better. But what it's meant is that we've got, two ex-directors in Chester that are facing a sentence hearing in the near future, I would imagine. We've got the very, very tragic death of a young girl on an inflatable trampoline. And then we've got a park in Cardiff who failed in their duty of care to work within the Act. And these are all available if you want to go and search for them and read the cases. And I suggest you do and have a little look at what's involved there. So the problem with that is obviously it damages reputation for us, but it also damages the insurance landscape for trampoline parks. And with only 2 underwriters, one of which is a mutual, we are at serious risk of not being able to get public liability insurance in the future. So let's talk about how this PAS has become the ISO. So in 2017, PAS was released, as I say. The PAS didn't have a huge amount of teeth in terms of enforcement. So a group from Europe decided they wanted a standard that was, going to be far-reaching, global reach, international standard for those countries that sign up to the standards organizations. And what took place was a group of panel experts, of which myself, Pete, and a number of other operators, Harvey from Gravity, joined those panel experts. And we had a very arduous, I think it was 2, maybe more, 2 to 4 years, I think it was, of jumping on calls with these with other experts, and I'll explain the 2 sides of those in a moment, in order to try and bring from the base document of the PAS an international standard to life. Now, the way that these are done is it's a collaboration really between different experts in the field, including a professor and various other people who understand physics and things like that, and then consumer organizations. And those consumer organizations also have representatives from health bodies. So what we found is that we had people who didn't understand the operation of trampoline parks trying to push standards through or key issues through that they didn't fully understand themselves. And I'll give you a bit of an example of those because I think this will add a bit of light as to what we've been trying to achieve. So the current, or from the early days of trampoline parks here in the UK, we used the American ASTM standard to look at court monitor ratios, and we decided that a 1:32 ratio was perhaps not quite appropriate for the British market. Now, the reason we did that, I think Pete can probably back me up on this, but the reason we did that is because in the early days of the British trampoline park market, we saw a number of players come in who were perhaps not leisure operators, who were perhaps not operating parks to a high standard. And at the same time, you had this kind of new thing in the UK. People, customers didn't understand the risk. So there was a melting pot of risk profiles there that meant we felt that the ratio needed to be 1:20. And so as a group, those that ended up consulting on the PAS, there was a court monitor ratio of 1:20 written into the PAS. The group around the ISO, so the consumer organizations, have been lobbying for a 1:10 court monitor ratio. What that means in real terms is whatever your direct labour salaries are for court monitoring currently, they would double, roughly. Now, I don't know what margins everybody in this call works to, but I'm quietly confident that in a post-COVID world, we might have seen a much greater number of parks fail if that had been the case. And also, I think one of the reasons we lobbied for it not to be 1 to 10 is because it doesn't cure anything. If I've got a if I've got a training budget for all of my court monitor staff, what I don't want to do is have to distribute that budget amongst a smaller group of people. A much larger group of people, thus each person getting a smaller slice of the training budget. And in real terms, I think we all know the rationale behind this is, if I doubled the number of court monitors on my courts, most of the time they'd stand around talking. It doesn't necessarily lead directly to an increase in safety in the park. And I'd rather have a smaller group of people who are higher trained, who have more experience by virtue of them having to take on more of the shifts, than I would have a much larger group of people who are much poorer trained. So if you guys are wondering what we have done for you, and I'm sure that's a question that comes up when you think about trade associations, that has taken hours, probably hundreds of hours of our time to get that across to the consumer organizations. And we're currently in a redraft because it's redrafted every 2 years. So there'll be a 2024 redraft, and this conversation has come up again. So we continue to fight on your behalf to ensure that a realistic proposition is in place for the standard. Now, the same is true of inspections. There is now in the ISO an inspection cadence. So you'll have daily, weekly, monthly, you'll have annual, you'll have inaugural. So this is an inspection if you're building a new park that you should have, or in their eyes, should have been done before the park opened. But we actually managed to lobby for that to be done within 3 months of opening. Now, there's a really good reason for that, is if you've invested in having your park built by a reputable supplier who's building the park within the construction standards of the ISO, then it seems illogical that a third party would need to come in to sign off the park to the construction standards when the obligation to have a park constructed to the standards of the ISO is on the constructor and the installer, which is probably going to be you and them, and also yourself. So we've tried to put it in place that, you know, there at the moment, there might not be someone who can come and do an inaugural inspection of your park pre-opening, particularly if you're building them in different countries around the world, or you've gone to an area where there is no infrastructure for this. So we've said within 3 months of opening, I think, is where it sits at the moment. So it's worth having the ISO. By the way, if you don't have it, I'll send a link to it after the call. And it's worth checking these and making sure that they're all accurate. Forgive me, because I've seen so many drafts of this, I sometimes forget which one we're finally on. And so that brings me to my last point here, which is the 2024 redraft. This is taking place at the moment, and there was a call for the experts to provide their commentary on the current standard and its implementation. Well, you'll note that we're now December 2023. We're a year and a month after its release in November 2022, and only now do we have an ISO assessment pathway, and not one park has been through it yet because it's so new. So we have actually lobbied for two things. One, to only make changes where compliance is impossible, and I'll explain that in a moment. And the second is to make no further changes until we understand the validity, the value of the standard. Now, the reason why we want to change any conditions where non-compliance is the only option is because there is an expectation in the biannual, so every 2-year inspection of your park, that every pad is assessed to its attenuation standards. So that means going around every pad in the park and dropping a GMAX test on every pad in order to understand whether the pad is still functioning as it was intended. But we don't have the facility to do that here in the UK yet. I've asked a few people if they would consider getting involved in that process. There's probably a market there to do it around Europe, but at this stage we feel it is an area where people are unlikely to be able to comply, and that will lead to a change in the way that we assess parks under the ISO, and I'll explain that with the relationship with LEAPS in a moment. But what it also means is that really we could find ourselves in a situation where no one attempts to comply with the standard because there is just one clause that is difficult or near impossible to apply to or comply with around the world. So I hope that you understand that, guys, and please just pop your hand up and give me a shout if you want to step in and ask a question or you want to add to this. Please do. So the next meeting for the 2024 redraft committee, or the ISO committee, is going to be late January. I will put together a bit of a report from that and let everybody know what that means for you and what's happening. But it does mean that if you want to be involved in getting that report, you need to have signed up to the emails on the Active Indoor Leisure Association website. You don't need to be a member. You just need to sign up to the mailing list so that I can at least send you that information. And if you don't tick send me future communications, I can't send it to you. So please make sure you do that and stay abreast of what's happening. So that's the 2024 redraft. So let's just talk about what this means for enforcement. So I alluded to a point there where compliance with the ISO is near impossible at this stage. So we have lined ourselves up with an organization called LEAPS, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. In just a minute, but they will be providing the assessment pathway through competent assessors, or competent inspectors they call them, which means that you're getting a layer of assurances that the person that's coming into your park is assessed to be a competent inspector, and then you get onto the register of competent parks. So what's happening now is we've met with the HSE, and the HSE have now got the SOP for the LEAPS inspection. I probably should have gone through LEAPS first. So I'll do that first, then we'll come back to this. So the relationship with LEAPS has come about because of the ADIPS, the amusement device inspection process. ADIPS has lost its reputation, would be a good way of putting it. If you can imagine what we mean by amusement devices, you'll know that there's a very broad number of amusement device operators out there. And so in the eyes of the HSE, ADIPS maybe doesn't carry the same weight that it once did. And so LEAPS, which is the Leisure Equipment Asset Protection Scheme, has been born from this, perhaps lack of faith in ADIPS. And so LEAPS are a register that is now recognized with the HSE. That means if you go through a LEAPS assessment, you have gone through a HSE recognized pathway for becoming a competent operator, which is massive. That's a huge thing. We've never had this before. And the procedure for this will be that you join the Active Indoor Leisure Association, and we'll talk about fee structure in a moment. You join us, we invoice you to join LEAPS. We give you the information that you need to be able to become an assessed park. You work through that process to become assessed, and then you go through your assessment. LEAPS will offer you an assessor. You do have to pay the assessor to come in. They come in and they do their assessment, and they look at what you've done in the park, and then you get your assessment badge, and you go onto the LEAPS register. You go onto our register, and the HSE now know, in terms of trampoline parks, those are the places to look to check whether or not a park is operating in both construction and operation to the standards of the ISO. And the PAS, by the way, that's gone. The only time we will use the PAS is if your park was built prior to the ISO. We will use the PAS for the construction standard. At this stage, I don't think you are duty bound to rebuild your park to the standards of the ISO. I think you're only duty bound to make sure your park lives up to the prevalent standard at the time that it was built. And if you were pre-ISO, so you're pre-March 2017, then we would expect you to lift it to the nearest prevalent standard, in other words, the PAS. Okay, so that leads to the next question, which is why do this? Why bother? I'm going to just change my screen share so that you can see the reasons for becoming an assessed park. So bear with me. Let's go over to this screen here. Okay, can you guys all see that?
Yeah, we can see it, sorry.
Thanks, Pete. Lovely. Okay, so this is the Active Indoor Leisure Association website. There are really 4 key reasons to become assessed. The first one is peace of mind. Okay, if you own a facility and you're not sure whether your park is living up to standard, or worse, you find yourself in a situation as I did, where the HSE really want to know whether or not you've been operating to a certain standard, being able to say, I have invested time, money, effort to do this standard, and these are the things that I'm assessed to, is invaluable, particularly in today's climate. Okay, The next one obviously is an enhanced defensibility position. So when a claim comes through, and we all know it's not if, it's when a claim comes through, being able to say, or even to put it on the website, that you are an ISO assessed park through the LEAPS Tyler scheme, that is massive, and it may do some great work in helping your defensibility position, not least because if you operate every single day to the standards of the ISO and also your HSE responsibilities, then you probably aren't going to be an easy win for anyone who makes a claim against you. And then the next one obviously is to protect insurance premiums. Okay, we know what the insurance landscape looks like at the moment. I'm not going to hammer that home. We want to try and use LEAPS in the future as being a one-stop shop for assessment for parks. So that means you don't then need to have an insurance assessment. You don't then need to have an LOtC assessment, which you currently do. Pete will talk about that shortly. So that's the intention with, in the future with insurance premiums. But of course, if you're batting away claims, your premiums will be well adjusted thereafter, because you shouldn't have, large reserves sitting on account every year your claims come through. And then the last one, of course, is you need this as an entry point to get into the LOtC and subsequent youth organisations. So there will be a marketing piece going out from LEAPS, because it's not just, and this is the point, LEAPS are not just assessing trampoline parks, they're doing all amusement devices, theme parks, high ropes, the whole works. And so if you have mixed FEC, a family entertainment centre or a mixed offering, then LEAPS can do that as well. So you don't just come to us and say, oh, we need a trampoline park assessment, and then have to go elsewhere to get the other bits assessed. LEAPS will get all of that done, hopefully in a single sitting for you as well, which then means we've tied it all back together, and we can go out to the schools, youth organisations, and get all of them involved in this process so they understand this is how parks should be assessed. Okay, right, that hopefully makes sense. Any questions while I switch back to my presentation? Okay, all right, good stuff. So we know the rationale. Let's talk about the HSE then. So the Health and Safety Executive brief their EHOs. Their relationship with EHOs is to provide the guidance and the information, the support the EHOs need when it comes to enforcing against facilities, including our amusement or leisure or pay-to-play leisure facilities. So the HSE have a meeting in January. And what they're going to be doing, so far as I understand it, is taking the operational SOP from LEAPS, which we're going to go through in just a moment, and they are going to give that to the EHOs and tell the EHOs this is what you should be looking for when you go into a trampoline park. So at the moment, the difference between proactive and reactive enforcement is proactive is what you get in your cafe, where they come in and they do their review of your cafe. They give you a 1 out of 5, a 1 to 5 review rating, put the sticker in the window, notices for improvement or prohibition, depending on what it is that you're doing right or wrong. But in the park side and the operations side, my understanding is that it is still the case that you submit riddle reports, or someone raises a claim or a case against you with the environmental safety or the environmental teams, and then they come in and they have a look, but they don't understand our markets. So you may have already had it where you have enforcement from an EHO, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're asking for the right stuff. I had a situation where they wanted to ask me why an inflatable, with a walled inflatable, so a full-scale inflatable, wasn't tied down, but it was in the basement of a big office complex, which is where it was in situ. There was no wind there, and it was tons heavy. There was no chance it was going to lift up, and so we had to have the designers of that inflatable actually write a letter of confirming on our behalf that there was no expectation that it would be tied down. However, the EHO was confident that if you put it out on a beach and the wind picked up, which is probably true, that would be a huge risk to the public. And so enforcement can sometimes feel disjointed or lacking in reasonable rationale. So that's going to change. Let's have a little look at that document. So again, my apologies, I'm going to switch out this presentation and go to a different screen. So this, if you can see it, is the LEAPS SOP. This is what I'm going to send out to everybody on the call after the call has ended. This document essentially goes through the SOP for the assessment process. So the first part of it goes through, glossary of terms, and then goes into how this process will work. What's important is towards the end of this, we have the annual certification requirements for assessment. So this is what the assessors will be looking for from the operational assessment. So this is the reference to the ISO. This is the subject matter of the ISO, and this is what they're going to be looking for. And in many cases, this annual assessment will be purely vocational online. So the operational assessment will mean that you will be asked for content in an interview online, and it may take place at a time that is of short notice. And there'll be a randomized question here. So it will be, demonstrate that SOPs are in place that conform to clause 5.3, where applicable, demonstrate that the SOPs have been determined by the outcome of the site-specific risk assessment. So, cutting through the language there, show me that your SOPs are born from risk assessment control measures. And I'm going to pick that SOP. I want to see that one specifically. And I'd like to see anything in the SOP and how it relates to the control measures. So you can see where this is going. So we'll just work through a few of these. So evidence of risk assessments to satisfy 5.1, submit your active agent health and safety policy. We've just been through 5.3, 5.4, a design and layout plan is required that identifies features, emergency exits, emergency alarm placement, and safety equipment. Now I'm going to circulate this, so I won't go through all of them, but I'm just going to pick out a couple of things that might be of relevance, some of the high ticket ones. SOP for staff information and training is required, and its contents address clause 5.7 in its entirety. So you'll need 5.7. We can't recreate 5.7 here for copyright issues. A random selection of training records shall be scrutinized against the SOP. Activity management. An SOP for activity management shall be assessed to meet the criteria of clause 5.8 in its entirety. The maximum supervision ratio of 1 to 32 should not be exceeded. That will need some explanation. I'll come back to that in a moment. The supervision ratios in use shall be based on the outcomes of the site-specific risk assessment. So one of the things that came out of the lobbying for not having a 1 to 10 ratio of supervision was that the current ratio of supervision in the ISO is 1 to 32. Now, before you run off and just start culling staff, you will need to do, in my opinion, needs assessment that demonstrates a rationale for a not worse than 1 to 32 ratio. That means get the ISO, understand what it says. There's a number of caveats in there. There'll be areas where you'll need to increase probably more than 1 to 20. There'll be areas where you'll have to have must monitor locations, so dismount pits or dismount any dismount devices, I should say. But please go through and read that clause, because that is very important. And anyone who's doing this properly should be aggregating their injury statistics before and after that change, and making sure that there is no material detriment to the customer, end user, staff, contractors, or anyone in terms of safety. Okay, so safety briefing information. I'm going to let you guys go through this, but there's obviously a lot of bits in here around inspection, testing, repairs, and maintenance. Your ability to demonstrate that you've adhered to that. Emergency action plans, emergency evacuation, documentation control, documenting accidents and incident, and this here will also include the aggregation of injury statistics for the there it is at the bottom there, for the purpose of understanding injury trends, which then feed back into the risk assessment, which then feeds into the SOP, which then feeds into the training of staff, customers, contractors, and everybody else. So there is a kind of feedback loop within this process that should be adhered to. Right, Pete's popped his hand up. Do you want to jump in, Pete?
Yeah, sorry, if that's all right, just very quickly. I mean, I think, look, when we with the PAS documentation, as you looked at earlier, the PAS documentation didn't have any teeth, and I think the one thing that everybody on this call needs to understand is that the ISO documentation has teeth. So what that means is, in the PAS documentation, there wasn't a huge amount of information around testing. And because we had Professor David Eager from Standards Australia, who was highly regarded in the health and safety world around testing, there is a much greater need for testing, not just in the design process and the the installation, etc., of the trampoline park, but absolutely in the repair and maintenance and ongoing looking after a trampoline park. And you've already alluded to it in terms of the pad testing, but there is other tests in there that need to be looked at and need to be understood by operators or by a professional that you get in to do your testing in order to be able to comply with this. Because, as I say, this has got more teeth than PAS did, and it will be used with more teeth, I think, than PAS was. So that's my tuppence worth.
Yeah, I agree.
Could I add some value to that?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that we're finding at the moment is the number of parks that are having persons conduct maintenance, service and repair works who have the wrong type of insurance. For example, I'm aware of at least three companies doing work on trampoline parks with the business description of builder. Now, when I've spoken to the two of the largest brokers in the world, Aon, number 2, and Aston Lark of number 16, they have confirmed with absolute clarity that in the event of an incident related to that work, it is the operator who will be then culpable because she failed to satisfy the requirements of subcontractor assessment. And I don't think it's immediately apparent that in collating people's insurances and understanding that they are covered for the business activity is absolutely so important. Now, there might be nice guys, and I don't dispute that at all, but what they are is not, they don't have the right level of protection, and ultimately anything they do wrong falls back on the operator.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. That's a very, very valid point. There's a great deal of information in the ISO around using competent persons, but there isn't a great deal of information around the expectation on them, because they will have their own standards to adhere to, including, as you say, having the appropriate insurance to do the job. A really valid point. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. At this point, I'm happy to just open it up to a bit of a Q&A. I will just talk about fee structure in a minute, but while we're on this document and we're on the ISO and we're on the LEAPS assessment, does anyone want to chip in and ask any questions at this point? Either I've done a really good job of explaining it so far, which is very unlikely, or everyone's a bit shell-shocked and needs a moment. I'm going to give you another minute. Just seriously, any questions, just chuck them out.
Hi, so I don't have any questions at the minute, but I'm sure I will in the coming months. So
Thank
I'll
you,
think of
Sam.
those and ask them.
Yes, of course. You guys, I think, have my email now, the majority of you, but I will supply it. So you can always reach out to me and ask a question. Anybody else want to stick their hand up? No. Okay, right. Let's just talk about fee structure very briefly then. I'll nip back to the presentation and we'll do that. Now, Pete and I had a discussion about this last week. The key for us is that we add more value than anywhere else. That's the key. Our issue is that LEAPS is a big engine, and getting, to be recognized with the HSE, to be able to do what they do, to ratify inspectors, as Sean quite rightly put there, we're talking about the people that have to have the right insurance in place to make these assessments. That's an expensive process. And so at the moment, the fee structure is you can join the Active Indoor Leisure Association, which you have to do this process, for $350 a year. Okay, and I think we've discounted at the moment. I will just check. If you go on to do the ISO assessment and you become a member of LEAPS and you do that process, the Active Indoor Leisure Association is probably only going to charge £100 a year. There is a £500 plus VAT fee to be on the LEAPS register, which, if it gives you access to HSE recognised register and all the other reasons, the LOtC, all of that stuff, I don't think that's huge. I really don't. One school booking should wipe the floor with that, should be the right way to go. But for me, I want to be able, with the Active Indoor Leisure Association, to incentivize people to move through the process. But also we need paying to some degree. The website, the Active Indoor Leisure Association website, doesn't happen by accident. I have to work on that website a lot more than I'd like to. I have to work on membership administration, and I also have to work on, you know, creating these relationships and pathways and writing the SOP with leaps and doing all those kind of things. So there is a fee there and it needs to be there. But I think the right thing to do for us, I think the right position is to incentivize people to move through the pathway by making sure that the next steps aren't so expensive that they aren't taken. So we would take your aspirant fee and say, thank you very much. That's helped to get you to become a member. If you then move forwards through the next process, we have a much reduced fee. Now, the long-term plan would be if we can get a broad enough audience of trampoline parks and everybody jumps on this bandwagon and goes through this process because they see the value in it, then the ultimate plan would be for us to start reducing those fees more so and have the association paid for by suppliers. But we need critical mass to get there. That is the only piece of sales chat I'm going to give you. The rest is up to you guys. Go and work out whether it's worthwhile to you. And if you think there is more value we could add, or there are things we aren't doing, please email me and tell me. We'll do it. We just want to get an audience of people together who actually want to make this, trampoline parks better. That's all we want. And we'll work with you, and we might have some space on the board coming up. So please get in touch and let's work through some stuff together. Right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hand over to Pete in a moment. Then we're going to take a short break, and if anyone wants to stick around and listen to the Why So Many Parks Fail session with me, then we can do that. So we'll get the important stuff out of the way. So Pete, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's great. Well, listen, so we talked a little bit already around the inspection process for leaps. So the next stage is, and why that process is important in terms of defensibility, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take that as the stick. The environmental health officers are going to want to put you through that process. So to come out the other side of that, once inspections have gone underway, then we have worked really hard over kind of 5 years to get a pathway into working more efficiently with schools. And that's why we have worked with BAPA, who are the awarding body for the LOtC quality badge, which is the Learning Outside the Classroom quality badge. So if I just talk about the badge a little bit and then how they all slot together, it's probably the easiest way. So the LOtC quality badge is the only national award that assesses both the quality of risk management and the educational provision for all of the different types of learning outside the classroom, whether that's from a museum to a trampoline park. Now, the LOtC itself, why would you want to go through that? Well, in the background, obviously, we're working with education. So it's a different kettle of fish to working with the general public. There is more emphasis, rightly or wrongly, there is more hoops to jump through to get educational visits to come to your park than maybe you would like. And what the LOtC quality badge does is try and remove some of those barriers because you've gone through a process to get there. The Department for Education, in their guidance, which is the health and safety on educational visits, which we'll stick up onto the website with this guidance document so you can actually read it, recommends that schools look for the LOtC quality badge when choosing any external providers for educational visits. The Outdoor Education Advisors Panel, or the OAEP, the OEAP, as I should say, they work, what they do is they coordinate the sign-off of all of the school trips that go out. Okay, so there's a process that schools need to go through to get a trip approved. They have to upload stuff onto a platform called Evolve. That then goes to somebody, whether it's in a MAT or whether it's a council, they then sign it off to say, yep, you can go on that trip. And the OAAP say, look for the LOtC quality badge because it means that there's far less paperwork for them and for an operator to go through. And that's the same in Scotland and in Wales. So in order to access the LOtC quality badge, you need to do a couple of things in order to do that. First of all, you have to have gone through, you have to be a current member of TILA. Okay, that's the most important thing. You can't access it unless you're a member of TILA. You must have passed the accreditation by an approved TILA inspector for PAS 5000 2017 for construction, if you were built pre-2017, or ISO 2365922, which you just talked about, and that needs to be done no more than 36 months before the accreditation. So it's a 3-year process in terms of that. Carry on. You're muted, Si.
It's the PAS construction assessment pre-November 2022 rather than pre-2017. It's everything pre-22.
Sorry, you're right. Yes, it is. So if you're in possession of that and you've gone through you have the appropriate inspections, then you can apply to BAPA for membership of BAPA, and then you will go through an inspection process to get your LOTC quality badge. Now, this does feel like a double inspection, okay? Because it will go through similar processes that you have gone through in the LEAPS inspection. We are looking to streamline that over the coming years, but this is not a quick process dealing with bodies like these. As I say, I think it was like 5 years in the making to get it to where it is now. So you will have to go through an inspection. Now, BAPA has historically looked after outdoor education centres. So they look at it from an outdoor education centre background, and there is a large list of various things that you'll have to go through. What will happen is you will get an inspector, an approved BAPA inspector will come along to the park. They'll then do an inspection, and they'll recommend either a pass, a deferral, or a fail. Okay. If it's a pass, then obviously you get your quality badge in place. You'll then get uploaded onto all the various websites, and you can then get the LOTC badge, the quality badge that you can put on your website to market the fact that you are an LOTC provider. There's 3 key components that will go along with the inspection. So there's the code of practice, and there's an accreditation scheme, and then there's the activity standards. So they're the 3 documents that you will get from BAPA. The code of practice is a large document that they are looking at, which basically goes through what your duties are when you want to run educational visits. So it'll have safeguarding of children, it'll have risk assessment, it'll have operating procedures, it'll have what sort of session plans that you'll need to have in place, all of those things that you expect within a code of practice. The accreditation scheme is the criteria that you will be assessed against, i.e., how many toilets have you got? What does it, is the place clean? Is the website up to date? All of the things that they will look at when they come through an inspection process. But they are inspecting to 6 main things, and they are, the provider has a process in place to assist users to plan the learning experience effectively. So in the guidance document that we will push out, that everybody's got, it kind of has an area about how this applies to trampoline parks and what to do to tick these boxes off. Because moving from general public to education, there are some hoops that we need to jump through and things that we need to understand. The provider uses accurate information about its offer. So again, website, various things are up to date. The provider holds activities or experience which meet learners' needs. So it's about assessing learners' needs when they arrive, etc. Various things that we need to jump through. There will be the provider reviews the experience and acts upon feedback. So what are they saying about it, and did it meet their expectations? The provider meets the needs of users and communicates effectively with users and does various other things within that. And the provider has safety management process in place to manage risk effectively. So they're the 6 key indicators that are used for you to get the quality badge. Under each of those headings, there's a few other bits and pieces that kind of pull out more information. I won't bore you with that now, because I say there'll be more guidance will come out from Tyler on this in the not too distant future. The costs of it are a membership fee to BAPA and an inspection fee, £135 membership fee and an inspection fee of £335. And what that does is, as I say, is opens up the ability to take school groups and youth groups more easily. Now, it's not to say that you can't do it without an LOTC quality badge. What it does mean is that the likelihood of it being signed off is significantly improved by having the quality badge. If you don't have it, then as long as within the health and safety guidance that's been given to schools, it says that teachers must look for the ISO standard and the compliance to the ISO standard in order for school groups to go. And if you can prove that, then you don't necessarily need to have a quality badge membership. But as I say, it will take a huge amount of effort off you if you want school groups to arrive, because you won't need to provide risk assessments and all your standard SOPs and all of the things that educational visits coordinators would need. So that is a little bit about the LOTC. Happy to answer any questions on that at the minute. As I say, it's taken a long time to get there, so feel free to ask any questions. Lovely.
This just means that you've explained it so very well, just like I did. I hope. Okay, thanks, Pete. I really appreciate that. This is no small work, but we obviously need to know that this is going to be of value to those that are, in the market as a trampoline park operator. So please, if you don't get a chance to ask questions now, feedback to me, talk to Pete, let us know where you're at with all this. There is a chance that some people are already having schools attend without any of these, but what's going to happen, as we know what will happen over the landscape, so in the landscape of the future, is the more news, the more HSE guidance that comes out, the more the LEAP system comes to the fore, the more schools get used to what the expectation is, the more likely it is that schools are going to end up going through this process of looking for LOTC badged sites. But also, this is, if I had just done my LOTC, which was the case when we did it with one of my parks previously, one of the first things I did is contact every school in the area. So if you need an excuse to ring and speak to every school, particularly in the new year when they're starting to look at their spring trips and what they're going to be doing, that's a great way to introduce yourself as a savvy operator and call them all and speak to their coordinators and say to them, we've just gone through this huge body of work. It's not that huge. If you've done the ISO assessment, you're not going to do a huge amount more. But if you go through it, then you absolutely should be using that as a bit of a sales methodology and putting someone on the end of the phone to call all the local schools. And knowing, the school near me has got 1,000 kids in it, I would expect it to be of high value if that's what you want to do. Okay. Aptly entitled, Why So Many Trampoline Parks Fail and What to Do About It, or certainly what I've been doing about it. For those of you that obviously don't know, again, it's not a sales pitch. I now work as a consultant to the broader leisure sector, but I've spent since 2015, 16, when they first started in the UK, working in the trampoline park space. So this is my take, looking back on trampoline parks. Now, the first thing is, this is a quote by Paul Marsden, MP. I think he was business secretary. By the way, that's not Paul Marsden, MP. That's a little Easter egg for those of you that like Emmerdale. But business is all about solving people's problems for a profit. And I think we know that. When we set out to start businesses, certainly having started my own business more recently, my role is specifically to solve people's problems. That's what I do. But if you think about trampoline parks, and this part of leisure, specifically the pay-to-play leisure sector, you'll start to understand the evolution of parks and why this might be one of the core reasons why trampoline parks fail. So the first thing is, businesses solve problems, and the bigger the problem solved, the greater the value in the solve. And to exemplify that point, if you imagine you lived in the US and you were struck with a life-threatening illness, well, the value that you could raise to cure that illness is likely to be much, much bigger than the value you would be able to raise for anything, really, anything other than that, personal gain, nice car, whatever it may be. And so what we find is that in business, the bigger the problem solved, the more value there is in that solve. And in the original leisure business space, the leisure sector began solving problems by charging for access to sports facilities, the key word being sports, and coaches. And so what was being solved was skill acquisition, which is learning and practice of skills, health acquisition, which is a bit like going to the gym, or in some cases, competition. But modern leisure businesses, as we've become more like FECs, problem solving has been watered down, and the skill, health, or competitive elements have been reduced to what I would describe as a commoditized access offer for novelty features or novelty facilities. And it's a move away from leisure towards entertainment. I'm going to get into that and break that down in a moment. But the key words here are commoditized access offer for novelty facilities. And importantly, that we've lost the solving of problems with things like skill acquisition, health acquisition, or competition. So let's explain this. We'll start on the right here with novelty equipment. And the best way to exemplify this is to talk about something called the scale of stickiness, right? This is my layman's language choice of words here. If something is high sticky, it is likely to have an acquisition element to it. As we say, health, skills, challenge, gamification, they all move up the scale of stickiness. And what I mean by sticky is they're likely to be repeat purchased. So that might be through membership schemes, or it might be through recurring revenue or reoccurring revenue. Okay, the two ways of identifying repeat visitation. Okay, but they're likely to serve a customer's specific needs with a reduction in friction and high value. Okay, so that's high stickiness. Now, trust me, I'm going somewhere with this as it pertains or relates to trampoline parks. On the other side of the stickiness scale, you've got low stickiness activities, and these are novelty activities. And the best way to exemplify this is a traveling fair. Okay, so a traveling fair is essentially a small theme park. Now, the small theme parks know that the cadence with which, or the frequency with which someone purchases from them is likely to be maybe once a year. And so they pick up their entire facility, move it somewhere else, put it back down, stay there. And they do that for 365 days. They probably only do it through the summer, but you see what I'm saying? There's so much novelty in that, so little acquisition, skill, health, or otherwise, that they know if they stayed in the same town for a significant length of time, repeat visitation would die off and ultimately trade would suffer. So they pick it up and they move it. Another way to consider this is if you took something like arcades and you put them in the middle of nowhere, who would go to them? Who would drive out of town 2 days a week or twice a week, 2 evenings a week, or every other Saturday to go and visit the arcades? It's unlikely that would happen. So what happens is low stickiness activities, they rely on force multipliers. So they need other high footfall locations. So if you're going to build arcades, you put them in a very high transient footfall location where people are coming in and out and replacing every single day. So somewhere like, I don't know, what are the big shopping centres outside London, Stratford, White City, whatever it may be. You might need critical mass. So you might need to be so big, like a theme park, that the size of your catchment area is so extensive that you can afford for everyone in your catchment area to come once every year or 2 years or 3 years. And that might be, your Thorpe Parks or your Alton Towers. You might have a lower retention business model, just like those guys who they know the cadence of revisitation is much, much lower. And so within a short drive time, they can have retention models like, if you just pay an extra X, you can come any day and you can come every day for a year. Or if you're outside that catchment area, they just resign themselves to knowing that they're going to try and get you once a year to come. So it's national adverts, large catchment area. But these parks will also rely on things like regular and significant reinvestment or reinvention. So the frequency with which Alton Towers puts in new rides to get people who once came to come back, that's an indicator of their reinvestment strategy in order to influence the frequency of revisitation. Or they might need to be the X-ist of something. So the biggest, the tallest, the longest, the steepest, the widest, whatever it may be. These are force multipliers that are likely to increase the drive time or the catchment area of a facility in a low stickiness or novelty activity facility. So that covers off novelty activities. And because trampoline parks don't necessarily have an acquisition product or offer, so you're not training people necessarily, you might not be coaching them, you might not be working on health acquisition either, because and it's a mistake that a lot of trampoline parks makes, and it is just my opinion, but trampoline parks aren't in the health market, and advertising to health has to undo the rhetoric of safety around trampoline parks. And also, if a family was thinking, what am I going to do for my kids this weekend, and they want a health activity, trampoline parks probably aren't even in the top 10. So that's why I think we're not in that side. It was my personal opinion. So then let's go to commoditized access offers. Commoditized, literally means that there is little differentiation between your hour of trampoline park activity and an hour at X other leisure facility or X other entertainment facility. And so what happens is you get comparison made purely upon price. So a family might say, well, we can go swimming for an hour for, I don't know, £6, or we can go to a trampoline park for £12. And the decision is probably going to be made on whether the mum and dad need to get wet, right? So they pay a little bit more not to get wet at your facility. Or they might end up looking at the landscape and saying, well, we could go to cinema for the same price that we could go to the trampoline park, but the cinema is going to be a good afternoon spent doing that thing. And so it's a heavily commoditized offer. The problem there is that you can also be compared with free facilities. So skate parks, right? You can go to skate park all afternoon, pay nothing, and just be there. Or you can go to the football field and kick a ball about with your kid. Or you can go to the park in the corner of the, the football field for young kids, for the climbing frames and such. And so what happens is leisure facilities that are heavily commoditized, or at least their offer is commoditized, they end up being priced at market efficiency. And if I did a poll of everybody's fee structure for an hour in your facility, I guarantee that almost all of you would be within £1 of each other. That means that you're all priced for market efficiency, not for the value you provide. And the likelihood is because you're not solving a specific problem for a customer. You are solving some problems, boredom, entertainment, activity, loneliness, whatever it may be. There are problems being solved there, but it's less specific. Okay. So low profit margins that come from this being priced for market efficiency. And what that really means, price for market efficiency, is the person who can afford to do it for the lowest cost gets to price the most competitive, and everybody else then suffers and fails. And that's where you see two parks in one town failing, or one park in a town of two failing, I should say. And so if you have low profit margins, that means you have reduced reinvestment, which means if you are a novelty activity here where you need to rely on reinvestment year in year into the facility, the likelihood is that you will struggle on that pathway, and it ultimately could lead to failure. Okay, so let's look at commodities in a bit more detail. This is a bag of rice at 52 pence a kilogram. This explains commodities, right? So rice is a commodity. There are very few rice brands in a supermarket. You'll see Uncle Ben's, Tilda, and probably the own brand for the supermarket you're in. 52 pence a kilogram, okay? That's Uncle Ben's, and this is Uncle Ben's famous attempt to decommoditize rice by curing problems for their customers. Right. And the cost of Uncle Ben's, the price, not the cost, the price of those packets of rice can be compared to the rice at 52p a kilo. Does anyone want to hazard a guess at what the markup is, or what the difference in price is as a multiplier? How many times more expensive is the Uncle Ben's microwave rice to traditional rice? Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. There is some intention behind this. Does anyone want to hazard a guess what the difference is? Someone's put a message in the chat. Hold on. How many times markup? 200%. Haley says 200%. So 200% literally means 2 times, right? A 2x markup. Thank you, Haley. That's good. It's a good guess. You are way off, which is cool. Anyone else want to hazard a guess? Shall we find out? There we go. So microwavable rice from Uncle Ben's is £6.36 a kilogram. By decommoditizing their products, they are charging 12.2 times the price of traditional rice. That is the power of decommoditization. That's a 1,200% increase, not a 200%, it's a 1,200% increase in the price of rice, and it's successful. But they did that because they solved problems. So it's quick, it's tasty, it's easy. You don't have to think about it. It can be paired with loads of different meals. What they did is they looked at the problems that everybody has when they cook dinner and went, I know we can solve for this. Why don't we solve all of those problems and then charge more for it? And the cost of producing microwave rice is not going to be 12 times the cost of producing dry rice. I'm sure of that. So the margins will be increased as a result. And what does that do? That puts them in a market leading position. If you think of rice, you probably think Uncle Ben's. You certainly think of the brand and the packaging. So let's solve for this. Let's work out, what do we do about this? Okay, why should parks decommoditize There are 4 really good reasons. The first one, bottom right-hand corner, you can charge higher prices, okay? So you can charge people more because you're solving a specific problem for them. The second one, bottom left, is a competitive advantage. If you do solve problems for a very specific customer, that's not a small pool of customers, but of a specific type of customer, then you can compete in a market of one because you will be solving different problems to your next competitor. At the moment, you're probably competing with Netflix or Amazon Prime, and there's a lot less friction and a lot less cost in sitting and being entertained by the TV at home than there is going out to a trampoline park. And so you will likely be sitting, just as I was, in rotation with all of these other entertainment opportunities. The other 2 that are less commonly known are the 2 different types of advertising. So advertising can be broken down into 2 different types. The first one is search advertising. Back in the late 1800s, this was the Yellow Pages. That's literally how it started the advertising world. It's hot leads because people are looking for something specific. So they go to the modern version of the Yellow Pages, which is Google, and they type in birthday parties for kids or after school clubs for kids or things to do on something with the kids. So they're looking for something, they're a hot lead. The disadvantage is that it's competitive because everybody who is trying to rank for those words or advertise on what is essentially PPC auctions, they're having to pay to sit next to somebody else who's advertising for the same thing. So you have to know what your customers want in order to narrow focus. And that's what decommoditization is understanding what they want to narrow that focus search. So you pay less to acquire the customer, solve their problems, and do so for a higher charge. Okay. And then the other one is interruption advertising. New mums, as I've learned, I'm not a parent myself. My wife and I haven't had kids, but our friends are having kids. And what we've learned is they go through a multitude of different problems, everything you can think of, right? It's incredible the amount of stuff they have to go through. But what they do is they look to communities to support them. So they might be in mums groups, they might be in other areas of the internet where you can, and physically in your local proximity, which your brick and mortar, so that's, valuable, they will have a place that they're going to cure those problems. And if you know the problems that you're interrupting or that you're curing, then you can interrupt where they are. And just to give you an idea, so search advertising was Yellow Pages, then TV in the 1940s. Search advertising in the modern times was Google, and then in 2004 became Facebook. That's interruption advertising. So yeah, Google was search, Facebook and social media from 2004 onwards was interruption advertising. It's history repeating itself in the digital age. So let's look at an example of an after school club and how this would help to solve problems, right? So what can we solve in an after school club for kids? Well, kids can be fed and watered. They could be tired, so parents can reclaim the evening. They could have exercised, they could have socialized, and parents, if the cafe is set up right, could have completed an extra 2 hours of work in the time between picking up kids from school and the evening beginning of their work ending. So there's value in that, and there's so much value in it that this could have a 10x increase in the value of each of those customers. So if that customer was paying £50 a year in visiting your facility, well, there's no reason why they wouldn't pay £500 a year to visit your facility 3 evenings a week when they work from home to cure these problems. And yes, they'd have to pay for food, but you can 10x, 11x, 12x the charge for a certain portion of customers that you're solving problems for. And that's the idea of decommoditization. So this is how I do it. I'm not going to preach to everybody else. You guys can go your own way, but these are the 3 steps that I take to decommoditization when I work with my customers. The first one is I list all of my customers' problems, issues, and objections. The objections are great because if I understand why they might object, then I understand how I can approach those objections when I'm talking to them about sales. So if you're talking to your customers about signing up for a membership for an after school club, for example, and you know what their objections might be, you can address them with a product. You can add a product to your value stack and say, yeah, okay, I know it's difficult to get here and park at that time, but don't worry, because actually we've negotiated a parking rate just over the road here, which is included in your membership, as an example. Problems, they're the obvious ones. What are you solving for? And issues, they just come in with the problems. Now, I will ask all the customers that, but I'll also recognize that not all customers are going to articulate all of the problems that they have because they may not think of them when they're being asked. So I'll do a bit of a mind map brainstorm, sorry for the use of terminology there, to try and get all of those problems down on a list, and I'm looking for like 100 problems here, maybe even more. Then what I'll do is I'll apply solutions to them, and nothing is off the table. If it's operationally impossible, I still write it down. If it's financially impossible because it's too expensive, helicopter people in from there to there, whatever, I write it all down. It doesn't matter. Everything needs to be on there. And then what I do is I go through those solutions and I make 2 lists. The first list is called the 10x list, and the other list is called the 1/10 list. And it's a really simple exercise. It's pretty broadly known now across the Internet of Things. The 10x list is, if I had to charge 10 times what I'm charging now for this product, what value would I need to include to make it worthwhile, to make it worth it for our customers? We could talk about value all day, but if my easy numbers, if a 1 hour session in the trampoline park was £10, if I'm going to charge £100 for 1 hour, what solutions from this list would I need to pack into that product to make it worth £100, or better, make it worth more than £100, so that the consumer is in surplus, they're getting value? Okay, that's the 10x list. And then on the other list, I do a 1/10 list. So if it's a £10 product and I can only charge £1, then what products the lowest cost to me, could I add into that £1 product to make it still profitable at a pound? So yes, they might not get access to the course, but I might have digital products. So things like, PDF guides for entertaining kids in the summer, or cards that give them a discount at every other facility, or every other, complimentary experiences around the town. So it might be that they get a card that gets a discount at an ice cream shop, or something that's not necessarily competing with you, but is complimentary. If you can do that, then somewhere in the intersection of those 2 lists are all of the problems solved that you can provide in a value stack for your customers that will increase the stickiness and decommoditize that product. And if you do that, and you do that well, and you market it effectively, and obviously there's a little bit, that needs to happen in the background, then there's no reason why you can't charge higher prices and have people increase revisitation. And ultimately, that is the only way that we make more money in any of our industries, is we acquire more customers, we charge them higher prices, and we increase their frequency of visitation. 3 things. We can't do any more than that. They're the only 3, in my opinion. So this helps to achieve that. That's me. That's everything. I do hope that if the earlier session wasn't providing a value enough, then this was. And obviously, from my point of view, the aim of the game with the Active Indoor Leisure Association is that I will try and provide some additional value beyond just the international standards and all of those kind of heavy administrative stuff every time we do one of these calls. So hopefully, next time we meet in a couple of months' time, you guys will be, inclined to jump on and have a little listen to what's going on, and we'll try and pack in some sort of concepts. So on that, guys, it's 11:20. I'm going to finish up and let everybody go. But thank you so much for your attention. If you're still on the call and you've still been listening all this way, my name's Si from Leisurology, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of months. And look out for an email from the Active Indoor Leisure Association. Really appreciate your attention today. So thank you, and thanks for the messages. I'm just going to read all of those and let you all go and enjoy your Christmas.
Thanks, Si.
Cheers, Greg. Thank you, guys.
See ya.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.